In the NBA, fans want to see young talent succeed from day one because, let's face it, most people are pretty impatient. This is very much a what have you done for me lately type of league based on how the sport gets covered, which isn't fair most of the time, but unfortunately that's just how it is. Most young players need a few years of acclimating themselves and development before they can consistently produce at a positive rate and make a truly winning impact. But that doesn't mean we should just ignore blatant struggles if they're not showing enough promising signs along the way. That brings us to today's video, where we will be discussing 5 young NBA players that are on the verge of busting this season, and by that, I mean they still have not come close to living up to the hype they were drafted with, and if they don't start to take some big steps forward this season, we may be forced to have to admit that they are going to be draft busts. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first player we'll be discussing that is on the verge of busting this season is Jabari Smith Jr. of the Houston Rockets. I'll start off by saying that I want to make it very clear that you can still be objectively an above-average player who can make a winning impact and still comparatively be seen as a bit of a draft bust. For example, Ben Simmons and Andrew Wiggins are seen as busts in the eyes of quite a few people for never coming close to reaching their full potential after being hyped up as the next big things, despite the fact that they were both all-stars at their peak. Jabari Smith Jr. was a top 3 pick in the 2022 NBA draft, and in the lead-up was seen by many as the top prospect in that class, because in theory, he as a prospect was supposed to be an elite two-way star in the making, who provided top-tier shot-making ability as a 6'11" forward that knocked down 42% of his threes in college, and shined in the brightest moments for his Auburn team. In the NBA, however, that shot-making has not translated at all, and his inability to create space off the dribble to get shots off as frequently has been a big reason why, which in hindsight should have been a bigger red flag as a prospect. He was knocking down contested looks regularly in college because, quite simply, defenders at that level weren't as good as they are in the NBA. Jabari, through 3 seasons, has barely improved at all, scoring between 12 and 13 points per game every year, and his shooting splits hovering at or slightly below the league average mark. He's a great defender, which deserves a lot of credit on that end, but we can't just sit here and pretend to be satisfied with him only being a 12-point scorer, putting up mediocre shooting splits on the offensive end when he was taken top 3 in the draft solely because he was expected to be so much more than that. And if that's all he's ever going to be in his NBA career, then I don't think it's unfair to call that a disappointment. So this season, in year 4, we need to see some sort of boost to buy back into his upside. The next player we'll be discussing on the verge of busting this season is Jarace Walker of the Indiana Pacers. Walker had the misfortune of being drafted to a team that immediately elevated themselves amongst the top tier of the league's contenders, as his first 2 seasons in the NBA have seen his Pacers team go to the conference finals and then the NBA finals back-to-back. Obviously, that's very exciting to experience off a rip, but it also means that the development of younger talent gets pushed to the wayside, and that's pretty much what has happened to Jarace Walker. Add in the fact that the team also went out and traded for Obi Toppin around the same time, and then went on to trade for All-Star Pascal Siakam, who both play the same position as Jarace Walker, and in all of a sudden you look back on that 2023 NBA draft and you scratch your head wondering why the Pacers even drafted Walker 8th overall that year in the first place. The 8th pick in the draft is a very valuable asset, so to waste it on someone who you have no interest in playing is irresponsible use of it when players like Cason Wallace, Derek Lively, and Brandon Podziemski were all picked shortly after that in the draft, and have all proven to be very promising young talents for winning teams that could have all produced from day one for Indiana instead. With Walker, he very well may still be able to salvage his career and prove to be worthy of a top 10 selection, but we just haven't seen nearly enough of him at the NBA level to prove it. Last season, he did make 75 appearances off the bench, and he did flash some intriguing talents as a stretch big man that can defend multiple positions, and even operate occasionally as a second secondary playmaker from the high post as a passer, but he also only averaged about 6 points and 3 rebounds per game, and ended up falling out of the rotation by the end of the year, being used for brief stretches here and there in the playoffs. With Tyrese Haliburton out for the year and Miles Turner gone, the Pacers will be more willing to experiment with their lineups this season, meaning this is Walker's chance to prove that he deserves consistent minutes every night, because if he can't even accomplish that by year 3, then the bust label will certainly be awaiting him as a former top 10 pick. Before we go any further though, I want to thank Arena Club for sponsoring today's video. I know we're all sports fans here, and that means we're all at least familiar with sports cards, with many of you likely collecting some yourself. And because of that, I think Arena Club is the perfect service for us here. Arena Club is bringing back the thrill of ripping packs and getting new cards, but it's also an online marketplace where you can buy, sell, and trade your cards instantly, just like that. Everything is all in one place. They grade the cards and ensure the authenticity of the cards you're receiving, whether it be from the packs or from trades or anything else. And on top of all of that, they've even got Pokemon cards for the collectors in other realms as well, which, for me, I'll be honest, growing up in the Wild West of buying cards online before all the authenticity came into these websites, I could have used it because I once bought a Charizard to be the coolest kid in middle school, and it ended up giving me 5 magic carbs in the mail, and back then you can't dispute anything without it being a whole hassle, so if something like Arena Club was around back then, that would have been very nice for me. Now, with these slab packs that you can purchase, they have a wide range of options starting at $25 per pack, and every single one of those slab packs has a grail to chase worth at least 20 times that price. So the excitement is back, ripping cards is back, and I even did one myself where I opened up a nice Ruby pack and ended up pulling a Scottie Pippen, and the joy, the excitement, it just brought me back to my childhood, and you all could be next. Right now you can get 20% off your first slab pack purchase or card purchase on Arena Club if you go to arenaclub.com/hoopsreference and then use promo code HOOPSREFERENCE and join me on your card collecting journey. Once again, thank you to Arena Club for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to the topic at hand. The next player we'll be discussing on the verge of busting this season is Usman Dieng of the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder have hit on so many draft picks that it's hard to stress too hard about the occasional miss, especially after being crowned champions this season, but the fact remains that Usman Dieng was a lottery pick taken 11th overall in the 2022 NBA draft, and to this point has yet to really make any kind of mark at the NBA level whatsoever. What's funny is that the Thunder had back-to-back selections that year, and actually, with pick number 12, selected Jalen Williams right after Dieng, and Williams has gone on to become an all-star and the team's second best player, just to further emphasize the disappointment that Dieng has been comparatively. The amount of minutes he has played and his overall production have consistently dipped year after year, with his rookie season being the quote-unquote best year of his career, where he put up a whopping 4.9 points per game, shooting the ball poorly, spending most of his time down in the G League. A similar story would unfold in each of his next 2 seasons as well, except his minutes would continue to trend in the wrong direction, and he would remain down in the G League for extended stretches without any room for him in the NBA rotation. His issue is that despite his impressive size and length for a wing player being 6'9" with a 7-foot long wingspan, he's just not shifty enough as a creator on the ball to beat NBA level defenders, and his 3-point shot has been consistently bad, making life even harder for him as a slasher. There may be hope for him on another team if he can get traded to a squad with fewer expectations, but there's just no realistic path to being on the court more often in Oklahoma City, with them gearing up for a title defense and an incredibly deep rotation already set in stone. The next player on the verge of busting going into the new season is Scoot Henderson of the Portland Trail Blazers. Scoot is in a similar boat as Jabari Smith Jr., who we discussed earlier, as he is objectively not a quote-unquote bad player, but he was a top 3 pick in the 2023 NBA draft, and at the time of that event going down, he was looked at as a future star in the making. Scoot was being compared to players like Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose, and John Wall as an explosively athletic point guard that could dominate transition play and overwhelm defenses with his burst around the basket, and after holding his own being the youngest player to ever play in the G League, there was a lot of intriguing tape on Henderson selling people on his upside. Scoot was so highly regarded that when the draft was going down, this was at the same time as Damian Lillard's initial reluctance to stay in Portland long term, and he basically gave the team an ultimatum where he wanted the Trailblazers to trade that number 3 pick, but they chose to hold on to it because they believed in Scoot as a talent so much they were willing to choose him over Lillard. Well, we're 2 years into his career now, and Scoot has unfortunately looked as pedestrian as it gets. He hasn't been bad, averaging about 12 points and 5 assists per game last season, but his efficiency is still well below league average inside and out, and that explosive athleticism that Portland thought they were bringing in hasn't been nearly as explosive as advertised. He just doesn't have the burst, quickness, or bounce that guys like D. Rose and Russell Westbrook had, and without it, Henderson's all-star upside may be out of reach, so unless he breaks out and proves otherwise this season, we're all likely going to have to admit that his ceiling is way lower than we initially thought it was. And finally, the last player on the verge of busting this season that we'll be discussing is Jett Howard of the Orlando Magic. Jett Howard is another member of the 2023 NBA draft class that sticks out like a sore thumb for failing to come anywhere close to matching the level of his fellow class members. The Magic drafted him in the lottery that year 11th overall, right in between Cason Wallace, who was drafted 10th, and Derek Lively, who was drafted 12th immediately after him, which as a Magic fan, looking at that has to hurt. The entire appeal of Howard as a prospect was that he was supposed to be one of the most NBA-ready scorers of the bunch, and at minimum, should have been able to handle some secondary scoring at least for a second unit after showing off some impressive shot-making potential in his one season at Michigan in college. Being honest, even at the time of the draft, the Jett Howard selection was viewed by many, myself included, as a pretty big reach, with most doubting whether he was really lottery-caliber talent, and 2 years later, those doubters seem to be proven right, as he has been one of the worst scorers in the entire league. There's just no way to defend someone who was drafted to shoot the ball, who can barely work his way into the rotation of a Magic team who is in desperate need of offensive firepower, because of the fact that in the opportunities that Howard does get, he's only averaged about 4 points per game, shooting 37% from the field and 29% from 3. The Magic are another team ascending in the Eastern Conference, so they too no longer have the patience for underwhelming prospects in need of development. This is a put up or shut up year for Howard, and if he can't emerge in year 3, he may struggle to even get a second contract. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these struggling young players moving forward. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.